Last 20, 21 years or more, I think the world has changed. And there is a possibility of guiding what really now might be needed to do a better software development. So for example, the emergence of AI-based coding, people are saying, X percentage of my code is written by AI now. I don't need people that much.
Agile and the Agile Manifesto became popular because people wanted it. It was like a prairie fire. It was like a wildfire. I mean,
ability to make great software that we had back in the day, I don't see it in these teams. They seem like a really completely, they're submerged in the water, and everybody else takes care of the process. And
then by the early 2000s, and with the Agile Manifesto, anyone that understood what was happening would say, we have this umbrella of different frameworks and methods, right? There's an umbrella, right? And we've been living in that particular mindset for years. It's not helping us.
But I agree. I mean, one of the reasons that we founded the Agile Alliance in the first place, and Alistair and I were part of that, and then Alistair and I and Sanjeev were part of a movement to form an Agile project management leadership group, because we felt like there was too little being said about project management. And so
if I were to look at the problems that we're facing today, not just within the Agile community, but across the world, whether it's product development or sales or marketing and such, it comes down to the fundamental lean concept of value.
We may need to have the capability to navigate within the organizational constraints, right? While we are talking about Agile, like in a conference, is something different from implementing that particular concepts within the constraints or the boundaries of the ecosystem.
So let's just not fix the one problem in this one place. You could be having a problem because of something further upstream or downstream. Think about the Phoenix project. There's actually a lot of people that all need to come together and look at this holistically. And I think that is one thing that's missing when we do a lot of consultancy, that we're pulled into a department.
One of the challenges that we now face with the Reimagine, with those things is a lot of people making assumptions now that they do know, or that it was siloed, or it only applied to X, or it only applied to this role, or it was this thing that we called Agile but really wasn't. And so we're up against the same problem.
We talk about people losing trust in Agile or in agility. For me, that comes down to how frequently we actually fail at making organizations or teams better using some of these principles.
People doing far too much work to far too great a detail, far too in advance of the actual need. And then from there, you can unpack into all kinds of things that have to do with.
Agile is currently a hot topic on LinkedIn, sparking discussion about its continued relevance, the need for modernization, and its potential evolution. To gain deeper insights, we will be joined by leading Agile experts, including Jim Highsmith, Sanjeev Augustine, John Kern, Alistair, Tricia Broderick, Joshua Crispy, Balaji T, Saket Bansal, Dave Smith, Michael Lloyd, and Petula, for an insightful discussion on the latest trends, challenges, and opportunities within the Agile landscape. This episode of the Agile Practitioners Round Table podcast will delve into pressing questions surrounding the future of Agile. Our expert panel will examine the potential need to reimagine Agile, addressing the current challenges and adapt to the growing influence of AI. Join us as we explore the crucial role of Agile in today's dynamic business environment and discuss how it can be effectively implemented to foster innovation and achieving business objectives. So without much ado, let's welcome and begin this epic Agile Practitioners Roundtable podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to the podcast by Agile Coaching Roundtable. It's a great pleasure and honor having this wonderful group together. It's literally a dream come true for us in terms of getting so many legendary people onto our show. So to begin with, first of all, thank you, Jim, for helping us get this big panel or maybe the group together. We could have not achieved this without you. And I'm sure that there are many people who are missing, who we wish to invite, but are missing over here because we wanted to keep it to like 10 maximum of a group. That's the reason why you don't see many. But thank you so much for joining us today. It's a great honor for us. Okay, so to begin with, today we want to have this roundtable discussion, whether we need to reimagine Agile. If yes, then what and how, right? So basically reimagining Agile. So to begin with, obviously the obvious question, is there any need for us to reimagine Agile? If yes, why? If no, why? So maybe, Tricia, would you like to start first?
So, Tricia, you're on mute.
I'm on mute, but it is 7 a.m. You're going to call me out and start with me?
Nah. But I have a thought. I think that especially the younger generation here is on the hook to say what's missing, right? We don't need to hear from the older people who've been doing this for 20 years and pushing the same old, right? The whole point is something's not right. And it's really up to the younger people here, the people who are coming in, let's say fresher, to say what's missing because they're seeing their world. But that's what I think.
So I just, in the first 3 minutes of this, I just got called out directly and then got called old. This is awesome start, people. Awesome start.
Oh, God. I'm sorry. I do believe you said something about using XP 25 years ago. So unless you
I mean,
started
it's
when
all
you were
legit. It's all
10.
fair. I'm just pointing out the obvious here.
Well, that was when Tricia was like 10. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
was
love
early.
that. You are now my favorite person.
Yeah, 10 plus 25 is 35. So
But
you're
I
35.
actually do agree with Alistair. I would love to hear some of the new voices first to start with it.
Okay, maybe Michael, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm counted as young these days, but it's good enough, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, the thing that really just sticks in my mind is what do we mean by reimagined, right? Because I don't think there is anything about the manifesto itself that hasn't stood the test of time. There is nothing in there that I think needs to be changed or even really revisited, right? Like I think the language all makes sense. It's all good. For me, the thing that's really, really missing is the way that we train and support our practitioners around that. And I think the thing that's just been really obvious to me the last few years is we've not done a very good job of helping people actually figure out, given this manifesto, it's very lightweight, given the frameworks that we've maybe built that are also usually quite lightweight, there's a lot of gray area. And we're not giving people a huge amount of support in terms of what does the actual practice look like? What are the things that you could actually be doing on a day-to-day basis to, live empiricism, to figure out how these things work, to learn and adjust. And when you look at the numbers around things like the Scrum certifications, there's 700,000 PSM1 holders, but only 1,200 PSM3 holders. Like we just don't seem to be focused on helping people really excel at these things and get to like really deep understanding. So people that have been here since the beginning, the early adopters, they probably really dove into this stuff in great detail, but I think we're now a lot later in that adoption curve, and we maybe need to think about how we help the general masses to really get that deep understanding of this stuff. So that for me is where I would want to focus.
Wow, that sounds interesting. I think yes. Jim, would you like to add or maybe talk about it?
Yeah, I just think that I'll go back to Jerry Weinberg's Raspberry Jam. Why do you spread it the thinner it gets? And I think we've spread Agile so wide that out on the edges it's really thin in terms of the knowledge, and that's not surprising for something that has grown so fast. And 75% of the companies in the world say they use Agile, but whether they do or not is open to question. But that's a lot of people, and so we've got. What was the number I just heard? 750,000 Scrum Masters. The level of knowledge and experience of those is probably pretty thin out there at the edges. And so what we've got here in this group is the thick part in the beginning. And so we have to figure out how to get that out to the edges more effectively.
Yeah, I would just add to the whole bit about reimagining Agile. It kind of started, for me, it started with a few realizations, to Alistair's point, talking to folks and seeing folks in audiences at conferences that have only known, quote, Agile, whatever that means. Like they didn't know what we older folks experienced back in the day. And that plus I was helping a Polish team. They wanted to retranslate the manifesto, even though there was already a Polish translation. And so it's fascinating to hear literal, no pun intended, questions around the meaning of words and things like the one principle about, the art of doing less, maximizing that weird phraseology that makes sense in English. And I remember them saying, yeah, our language doesn't even support saying it that way. Like and that started me thinking, like, oh, wow, it's hard enough in English for people to understand, quote unquote, to grok the manifesto. And then a friend of mine that I speak with weekly about geeky stuff, and he pointed out, yeah, John, what's a new person out of, into the workforce supposed to do with the manifesto? I'm like, yeah, there's no start here. There's no step one. There's, it's like the old days of reading the manual when you're starting to learn something, and then maybe 6 months later you read it again and go, oh, I think maybe that's what that meant. So yeah, it just started all dawning on me. And then I contacted Jim, and we had another roundtable, like with James Grenning and Jim, myself and Tim Ottinger, tried to get a few people together. And then, that kicked off and Sanjeev joined. And so this little bit of a reimagining Agile initiative came from kind of a realization that if you already understand the manifesto, so to speak, you don't need it. And if you don't, where do we turn? So for me, one of the thrusts is I'm trying to find exemplars out in the world of places where agility is flourishing, places where they've figured out how to live the values and the principles, and then doing a little research, so those can form little beacons of hope, as we call it, little nice stories. But then from a research point of view, trying to dig in, because there's a few places that it's like, wow, I want to work there. What the hell? How did you make this happen? That's crazy talk that you actually work in this way, and to try to dig out moves, small things they might have done. And it's not lost on me that agility, in my opinion, must be experienced. You can't, you can read about it in a book, and yes, we're putting beacons of hope out there. We're going to try to put little moves. Hey, here's things. I think of it as a pattern library to go try them, but it's so contextual, and it's so much more of a mindset thing than it is a process thing. So I think we just basically, and we got screwed by thinking that the world is just complicated and it's like an engine and we can apply a process that's the same and it will just work. And no, it won't. So I spoke far too much there, but there's my opinion on reimagining Agile.
Yeah, so maybe I want to think a little differently. In my understanding, the Agile Manifesto was written to help people to do software development. So because the writers were trying to share their experience and give some high-level guidance so that we can do better software development. That seems to be my understanding of it. And it has great values and ideas which help us in putting the right mindset. But in the last 21 years or more, I think the world has changed. And there is a possibility of guiding what really now might be needed to do a better software development. So for example, the emergence of AI-based coding, people are saying, X percentage of my code is written by AI now. I don't need people that much. And then the emergence of remote working, where you see that good percentage of your people are working remotely. Now, maybe there is a value in thinking of how can we guide further from 2001, now it's in 2024, and things changed drastically in the last 3-4 years because of the COVID-19 and then the AI emergence. There is a possibility of adding or helping people to do a better software development in the changed era. So it is not necessarily we are saying that the thing which were there not relevant, but I personally believe there is a need of augmentation to consider the new reality.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to build on something that Saket just said. I think there's a huge opportunity to look forward. So if you look backward, we can see that Agile is an aging paradigm. The manifestations of Agile, whether it's Scrum or Scaled Agile Framework or anything else, have been around for a while, and people think they understand it even if they don't. The problems that these frameworks were originally constructed to solve not only still exist today, but have become exacerbated by the fundamental problems that Saket mentioned. A lot of remote work, a lot of hybrid work, and also coming out of the post-COVID way of functioning, we've sort of seen a corrosion in our institutions, and the corrosion has to do with trust. Trust among teams, trust between companies and individuals, trust in Agile itself. Right? You hear people mention the Agile industrial complex, and well, Agile itself is being questioned, and there's a lack of trust in that. So there's an opportunity here to go tap deep into the fundamentals of Agile, the mindset, the principles, and look forward, whether it's with AI or dealing with the complexities of AI or the complexities of remote and virtual work, and help rebuild the world, if you will, a fractured and fragmented world using this good thing that we know as Agile.
And for some reason, my connection on browser is really bad. All the problems still exist. And I like to always kind of say it took 10 years to get momentum in the Agile community, ish, right? But now it's taking another 10 years to rebrand. Like, John, you mentioned, so many people are using it, but in reality, or they never knew what life was before Agile. Yes, they do, because they're all still doing what was done before Agile. They just call it Agile terms, right? And so that's one of the challenges that we now face with the reimagine, with those things is a lot of people making assumptions now that they do know, or that it was siloed, or it only applied to X, or it only applied to this role, or it was this thing that we called Agile but really wasn't. And so we're up against the same problems where we've seen some successes, and yet now we've got a branding issue on top of it, because there's a lot of people, I'll have somebody in my class that will be like, I already know all this. And then like in the first hour, they're like, so I don't know any of this. But that's a challenge that we are now facing, which is why I'm in support of the reimagining, because there's always room for growth. There's always room for movement, but there is a branding issue of misunderstanding now that we're up against that we didn't have before.
Could I maybe just add to that, because I think that ties in nicely to what Sanjeev was saying as well, which really got me thinking about the problem of trust, right? And if we talk about people losing trust in Agile or in agility, for me, that comes down to how frequently we actually fail at making organizations or teams better using some of these principles. And that's not because the principles are bad, it's because our understanding, our training, because the way that we apply these things is often just a rebranding of what we've done before. So of course, this doesn't make things particularly better. And then we end up with this harm trust, and then we end up in exactly that problem Tricia mentioned, right? Like, it feels to me like maybe part of the problem is that we've spent so much time just trying to kind of Agile wash things and kind of get people using the right words in the right language. And I mean, this varies depending on the circles you're in and the organizations you're in, but it does feel like we don't actually spend a lot of time talking about the outcomes that we're achieving and how things are improving, even how to measure that things are getting better, which is obviously a big thing that I care about. But I think the natural result of all those is this lack of trust. And then to your point, like reimagining Agile is in a lot of ways about trying to build that trust back up again, right? Which is only really going to be done by demonstrating results.
I have both an agreement and disagreement with that, ever since Saket pulled the, the line and started unraveling. One, which I definitely won't delve deeper into, but I think it does ask for a little bit of more of an investigation, is that the part that I disagree is software development was being done remotely in times when we barely even had Skype. So I was in Brazil and I worked with Siemens and I worked with Nokia when cell phones were not what we know today. And we're not even calling it extreme programming. There were practices and we were taking them and hey, it works for us, let's do it. Yet one of the things I see that it's not only that doesn't happen today the same way, I see the quality and ability of doing better software in incumbent companies. Let's not talk, startups, LA, like this is a whole different space. But when you think most of the companies that have tech in-house or that hire a third party, the ability to make great software that we had back in the day, I don't see it in these teams. They seem like a really completely they're submerged in the water and everybody else takes care of the process and tells them what to do, even how to do better software without even knowing how to code. So it's going to be interesting to see how AI helps, because we start seeing more and more like a script kid is what I call, like, how to write 1 or 2 lines of code, but do you really know how to model mathematically the problem that you're solving? So there's a whole world to dive into that, to talk about better software development. So I won't go there very much, but I would like to add, from my perspective, one of the things I find that the need for reimagining or not agile, I'm not sure if we need to reimagine it, but I think we need to have maybe more of a dialogue about wants versus willingness. And I'm not sure if this works in all languages, but I want what agile can give my organization, but am I willing to be agile? There are thinking patterns that need to be in place for me to obtain that thing that I want. So I might want it a lot, but I don't have at the same level or even more the willingness to do these things. And I think it's an honest conversation. It's possible that several organizations, they are just out there wanting but not willing to do the work, and they might need then be using something else, pieces of the practices, or being in this sort of hybrid space that sometimes happen. And I remember when we had the discipline agile and people bashing Scott Ambler because this is just yet another PMI thing. But I think now it's the future of agility might be within the scope of nuance. So I'll stop here to not monopolize the conversation, but that's where my mind and my line of work have been going this past few years.
Oh, I'd just say I would, echo it a little bit of what Tricia's saying, is that, it was easier back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the only thing we were really up against was, traditional waterfall thinking. Today, we are agile janitors because like the mess that has been created is mind-boggling. And people do believe that they know this stuff already. Why are you wasting my time? And then when they get in there, it's into a training, they understand, they're learning things from lean, they're learning things from the safety industry, they're learning all kinds of techniques that are just changing how they really approach work. So those experiences that John Kern mentioned, it has to be experienced. You simply can't just read about it. And I wrote a book called The Joy of Agility, which is because we used to, or sometimes we still do, experience a certain joy when we are actually able to be agile and overcome obstacles and succeed sooner than we thought possible. That's the kind of thing that I want to draw people's attention to, is that joy, not so much my book, but just how you experience that joy of experiencing real agility. But it's hard because the landscape is complicated. It's so much more complicated than it was in the late 90s and early 2000s. It's messy. And then, you add in hybrid and you add in AI. I mean, there are executives who don't know a damn thing about AI who are saying, tell all the vendors that they should be using AI next year, and we'll lower the prices for that. I mean, literally, that's we work with CTOs who have never written a line of code. I mean, most companies that are not pure software companies, they make other things, printers, this, that, oil well, drilling software, or whatever the heck it is. They still have no clue what software is to this day. And so it's always the redheaded stepchild. and we have a lot of problems just trying to get some order into that space, or any kind of agility. It's very, very difficult. So it's still to be kind of like a marketing campaign is what's needed to help people realize that they have so much more to learn to experience this joy. It's almost like there's more of a need for better marketing than ever.
So yeah, the thing that someone said that triggered a thought in my mind is the Agile and the Agile Manifesto became popular because people wanted it, and that somebody mentioned that in their discussion. It was like a prairie fire. It was like a wildfire. I mean, we literally just posted that thing up, and within weeks and months, there were thousands of people signing their names on it. I mean, people wanted it. Something was wrong, and they wanted what they couldn't have at the time. I don't see any of that hunger now. We're in a pushing situation. We're trying to convince people that they ought to want this, but I don't see any wanting. So there's a little question here, like, what is it people are wanting? But one of the reasons for like saying we need to reimagine has been co-opted. Yes, all of those things. But if people don't want it, you know, you're trying to push a string. So that was the thought that I got out of listening to the people who came ahead of me there.
Actually, I did a couple of in-depth papers. I got to thinking about this idea of leadership, and that the Agile community was trying to tell senior leaders how to be senior leaders. And so I wanted to turn it around, and I wrote a couple of articles from the CIO perspective and asked them what did they think. And so one of the people that I interviewed extensively was Jeff Smith, who was CIO at a big company in Australia. He was a CIO of IBM IT shop that had over 20,000 people in it. And so he's a CIO, CEO of several different large organizations. And one of the things that I got from him and the guy who was running these transformations for him was that they felt like the Agile had gotten away from engineering. And too many Agile coaches and Agile Scrum Masters and that kind of role, not that they weren't necessary, but that there were the percentage of them to coders was out of whack. And many of these people had never coded in their lives, and yet they were telling developers how to run their business. And I think that that's probably true in other areas too, that we sort of went beyond the boundaries. One of the things that also is happening to the Agile movement is there was a conference last spring or last fall. There was an obscure, you know, like neurodiversity, or not a neuro conference on AI. And so it was one of these ones that sounded really scientific and academic. It attracted 17,000 attendees. And the Agile conference, I know, is struggling to get back to 1,000 where it used to be through 2,000, 2,500. So AI is sucking all of the money out of the marketplace. And that's another reason that things are going south for a number of people who are having trouble. You know, I have a lot of friends that have trouble finding jobs now. And I think that's one of the reasons that all the money's come out of Agile, come out of traditional software development, and it's being put into AI.
Okay, wow. Getting to know so many different perspectives from each one of you, specific to what, what are your thoughts on the, maybe the idea of reimagining it. And maybe, obviously, while having this conversation, there were different thoughts shared from the point of view. Just for an example, maybe what Tricia, you were mentioning is like, people believe, I mean, the people practicing Agile now believe that they know everything as of when they get started. But the moment they get into, doing it, obviously, it blows out. So maybe that's where I see maybe one of the challenge area, or maybe just for an example where Alistair was saying, back in 2000, people were anticipating it, or maybe people were looking up to it, there was a need, or maybe people were wanting to have it. And now it's like more of a push mechanism where we're pushing things to them. So maybe the next thing that I just wanted to lead up to this conversation is like, are those the actual challenge? Yeah. Yeah.
Vivek,
Yeah,
before you move on to the next, maybe we want to hear from Balaji and Dave as well.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I missed
Yeah,
that.
yeah, no, it's okay. I think actually most of them already covered the points. I will take up the next question. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. So maybe this is what I just wanted to lead up to is like, is this, a bigger challenge around over here, right? I mean, do we see, there are challenges which people are not discussing, or it's all about, maybe the aspect of trust, or it's all about the aspect of, how software codes have been written. Back it was something else. Now we have more in AI induced development. Are those a challenge, or there are bigger challenges which people are not talking about? Yep.
So I will go first now. I'm awake, people. I'm awake. So here's the thing that I don't think our community takes ownership of. We crapped on a lot of people as we were rolling things out. We crapped on managers, we crapped on QA, we crapped on leaders, like we crapped on people who were not technical. We were judgmental. And I do say in the royal we, but I remember sitting in a conference session as an executive, as the director of development, going, why am I here if all of you just think I'm crap, right? Like it's, and guess what? All of those middle managers are now senior leaders. And guess what they don't want to be associated to? A movement that told them they weren't very valuable. A movement that told them to get out of the way. A movement that told project management to just get to lose and things like this. And now it's when I say it's a branding issue, it's a problem because there were a lot of very vocal, very intentional things that were done that didn't make it inclusive, that didn't recognize that it isn't just developers. I took the VP of sales to an Agile conference. There wasn't a session for him, but he was driving me nuts as the director of development, because it turns out you can't deliver software without the rest of the organization. So like, there was just a lot of judgment to HR systems and performance reviews and all these things that we're now reaping the results and the consequences, because all of those people are now senior leaders in different roles that don't have a great taste or association with Agile, either that it's just IT or that they fought against it and were told they weren't valuable. And I think that's got to be an acknowledged thing in our community, that we messed up. I will dismount from my soapbox.
Yeah,
That was
Balaji,
spot
great.
on.
And agreed, John. Nothing was Agile about those things, but unfortunately it got
Right.
associated.
Yeah, that's like I don't know, maybe you missed the whole first bullet, just saying. Yeah.
Well, but I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in here, but even on this call, we're doing the same thing. People are here complaining about non-technical people, like as though one of the things that's a bit of, I never talk about it, it's a bit of a hot button, but people for me on Twitter going, there's people out there saying Agile is just project management, but it isn't, it's coding. And I'm going, no, it is only exactly project management. It's what it is. And all the XP people going, it can't be because where's the programming? And I go, but it's not just about software, it's about everything. And so you have technical practices in every domain. And I hear that, but we've been doing that on this call. So doubling down on what Tricia said, it's still programmers spitting on non-programmers. And that was part of why we created the first Agile conference in 2003. Was I was tired of going to an XP conference, and they made everybody else a second or third class citizen except the programmers. So I wanted to anchor that even on this call we are doing that. So fully on board with you, Tricia. I had never thought about it. It is a message that's been delivered for 25 years since the arrival of XP, and we are living with those consequences. So thank you for that.
Balaji?
Yeah. So I actually like to share my perspective on, like, in terms of implementing Agile, right? Probably the business operating model of the company needs to be taken into consideration while we are talking about adopting the Agile, or rather trying to do a transition or a transformation, because typically a product company is something different from a kind of a service company versus a captive unit. Okay, and by the way, the question is more on the question is more on the challenges, right?
Yes,
Right, Vivek?
yes, yes.
Yes, yes. That's what I was just trying to articulate it. So the second point which actually comes to my mind is we may need to have the capability to navigate within the organizational constraints, right? While we are talking about Agile, like in a conference, is something different from implementing that particular concepts within the constraints or the boundaries of the ecosystem. So probably while we are implementing Agile, we may have some kind of an organizational constraints, a kind of a dependencies, a kind of an impediments, a kind of a potential risk, or some kind of a slippery roads. Also, I think those things need to be kept in mind, and we should not be looking out for a one size fit all kind of a framework or a solution, saying that because okay, this framework worked perfectly in this company may not be exactly replicatable. I think those are all some of the subtle nuances or the nitty-gritties which we may need to keep in mind. So just thought to share it. Thank
Michael?
Yes, Mike.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things that's interesting for me is I've been asking this question, what are the challenges that you see, to like every person that I've spoken to in the last couple of years. Every conference I go to, every workshop I run, I ask this question, and I've been like gathering up the responses. And actually, my most recent talk was trying to like dive into some of that stuff and try and categorize it. And the thing that was really cool to me was that it really felt like 80% or more of the challenges that people were talking about when it came to like change and agile really just came down to two things. And so one of those was what I was calling agile commodification. It's the problem of like, well, agile is just the implementation of this framework that we're going to do from the top down, and you have to follow these processes and do the ceremonies and everything will be fine. And that often creates a huge amount of negative outcomes, right? But then the second one, which is the one that I hadn't thought of as much until I started talking to people about it, was this thing that I've been calling culture conflict. And it's the disconnect between the traditional values and principles that managers are often taught to adhere to, and how that's different potentially from some of the principles that we now know are maybe more valuable for us in complex knowledge work. But in particular, I just wanted to tie it back to what Patricia was saying, which is that what we've often done in the past is we've tried to like have this argument around, well, this culture is right and this culture is wrong, or if you do this, you're correct, and if you do this, you're stupid, right? Whereas what we've been really, really bad at is bridging that gap and being like, hey, look, these things that you maybe learned in this context, they might have made sense in a given context, but they may also have been inherited. And instead, maybe this is the set of values and principles that you could apply and try in this different context and see if it works better. But we've taken such a standoffish approach to it that people are not often going to have that conversation with us. But like I said, the thing that's just fascinating to me is that those two things accounted for well over 80% of the problems that people were telling me about at these classes and stuff. So it seems like fairly obvious that there are some really big wins that we could make have if we were to focus on those areas instead of fighting over Scrum versus Safe or whatever the in vogue argument is today. But again, it's maybe not as much social media clout in having some of those conversations. So.
I just want to say I've got a client call coming up, so I have to step off, and I want to thank you because there were some nice new thoughts that I hadn't heard or thought of before that already came up. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Alistair, for coming over. Really appreciate.
I don't know if
Okay, I
anyone
think
noticed
Jim.
the shield in the corner there, but he's actually Captain America, so he's got I think a world event to actually go and cure. All right, so he's just going to don the spandex and nip off, and he'll be back in about half an hour. Sorry, Ram, you were saying?
No, I was just checking with Jim if he would like to add.
I was going to push back on something that Alistair said, and I agree completely with Tricia that there was too much dissing of managers and project managers and those things in the early days. But when there's actually some meat behind that, in other words, when I have a CIO of multiple organizations who tells me that it's out of balance between technical and non-technical people, you kind of have to listen to that. But I agree. I mean, one of the reasons that we founded the Agile Alliance in the first place, and Alistair and I were part of that, and then Alistair and I and Sanjeev were part of a movement to form an Agile project management leadership group, because we felt like there was too little being said about project management. And so, you know, I wrote the first book on Agile project management. I've written a book on Agile adaptive leadership to try to move the discussion from the team level up a level, and Sanjeev has been part of that too. So there's been efforts to do that. We just didn't have a loud enough voice.
So I would just say, here's the progression I see. The 90s was about a lot of lightweight methods starting to get named and experimented with. Of course, some of that stuff was happening in the 60s and 70s and 80s, but let's say a bunch of named lightweight methods appeared, and it was exciting. Then by the early 2000s and with the Agile Manifesto, anyone that understood what was happening would say, we have this umbrella of different frameworks and methods, right? There's an umbrella, right? And we've been living in that particular mindset for years. It's not helping us, because someone in sales, someone in people operations, someone in marketing, the entire organization doesn't think like that, doesn't work like that. You have product people saying, I don't do Agile, I do the product operating model. That's the cool thing now. You have a designer, we do design thinking, we don't do Agile. You have a UX person, we do lean UX, we don't do Agile. Agile has become this umbrella of frameworks and methods. That's all it is. If we can't transcend that, we'll never reimagine Agile. The entire reason I started focusing on the definition of Agile in the dictionary, to be able to move with quick, easy grace. An executive needs to be able to move with quick, easy grace. Sales operations team needs to do it. I think of everyone needing to move with quick, easy grace, or the alternate definition being quick, resourceful, and adaptable. Being quick, resourceful, and adaptable applies to everything. And you might say, well, that's useless because it's too broad. Well, no. And here's the other problem is none of us share the same definition of Agile. There are hundreds and hundreds of different interpretations of this word. We all talk about Agile conferences. We're going to an Agile conference. We go to an Agile conference, and everyone has a completely different idea of what the word means. So to me, you know, working in large organizations, for the most part, you start to see a tremendous need for agility across the entire organization. And that doesn't fit into a framework. So I think we need to get into a post-framework world where we're no longer constrained by that, you know, and it was useful for a time, but it's no longer, now it's actually holding us back.
Absolutely.
Bravo.
Saket?
So like I'm building on what John said and Michael said. What I believe is one of the problems which we have with Agile is the promotion of Agile. I think we need to let it cool down, because many organizations who sell Agile, they are sales machine. They need to sell it more. And in order to sell it more, I need to make a easy, explainable framework. I need to have my sales target. I need to train more and more. And I need to find out how do I grow my training? How do I bring more people into it? And then that's it. That's the whole commoditization. And that is creating the problem. If we don't push Agile, I think the pull will come, because in the process of pushing Agile, the organizations and the most of the certification bodies and the consulting bodies, they have their partners and they have their sales goal. They have investors who wants to get their returns back. So it's just a one way of making money. Yeah, that's the way I see it, at least in Indian market. It's a pure way of making money. So if we somehow let this way of making money cool down, and we focus more on, it's a way of solving agility, it's way of bringing flexibility, graceful, way of working in the whole organization, things are done. Yeah, but for that, the sales has to go down. Yeah, and that is, in my mind, is the problem. And I don't know if this problem can be solved. I only see this problem is going to kill the brand name Agile. That's what is going to happen. I don't think anyone can solve it. I just see that this brand name is getting impacted because of this problem.
I absolutely agree. And, I'll definitely make it short because I think between Tricia, Josh, and Saket, you end on the direction I have been experiencing as well. The perspective I guess I would add is I think these things, they just breathe, things contract and they expand. Agile is a fad. It turned out it wasn't. Now, Agile is that. It turns out it probably isn't. So I think there are moments where Agile will be more popular or less popular. But that doesn't necessarily mean a need for rebrand. But then again, we might not be in agreement with what rebranding really means. But I think, Agile just is. There are better ways of performing at work, whether we are with teams, we are with distributed groups of collaborative people. And I think the question then turns to people who call themselves coaches in this space. Like, what do you think you can help with if Agile seems to be transitioning away from frameworks and into something that really is, tell me your problem and let's see how we can make you move forward? And it's possible that a lot of us are unskilled in that terrain. It's a very, it's quicksand terrain. And the frameworks and those methodologies, they keep you very grounded. And you can say, like Saket said very well, you can sell very easy. Hey, I do these 3 things. You can buy this, or and you can choose from my palette of services. And now it becomes a little bit more, we are people and we're going to have a conversation, and you're going to have to investigate, maybe throw in some scientific thinking and formatting of problems in there. And that is a very different skill set from your average I sell, you save, or Scrum or whatever training, and then you go make your own way. So that's what I would add here.
Interesting. Dave?
Okay, well, every time somebody has spoken, I suddenly thought of something, but I thought, no, I'll wait, and then it's just gone. So I thought, I'm going to write some of these down. I'm going to make sure I get them out. I'm going to revisit something that Tricia talked about, crapping on managers, and I think that is a valid point. I see Agile as going through 3 different phases, and I saw the same thing with Little and a whole pile of others, where there's suddenly a ramp up and there's a huge hunger for it, and then there's people that jump on the bandwagon, and we're starting to manufacture our own yachts and manufacture our money from there as a result, not mentioning any consultancy also. And then it goes through, look, it just hasn't worked for us, and it becomes a bad word. And I think the reimagining Agile is because it's gone through so many different phases, or rather it's been misinterpreted so much that the Agile that people think of today is different to how it originally started. I'm sure when Jim and others began that manifesto, they never had the idea that it would turn out to be what it is today. I'm not blaming you for that, by the way, guys. It's just been misinterpreted. I just want to make that clear, Jim, sorry. But it's ended up that way. Now, I do know when I've been around to various companies and some managers have shown me around, and then they say to me, can you see what the problem is here? I think, yeah, it's sitting right opposite me. But I can't say that. You cannot say that to the managers, but I will tell you somebody who did, and his name was Deming. When he got headhunted back to Ford, the first thing he did is have a go at management. Now, his idea was management are the problem, therefore management are the solution. If things are failing, it is the fault of management. But the way in which you put it across, there was a lot of hostility, and the one person that wasn't too phased by it happened to be the director right at the top, who actually said, this guy is onto something here. Yes, we need to change our ideas. Now, if it hadn't been for him, all the others had such frail egos and would have just said, don't get that guy back. But unfortunately, he was saying the right things. He may not have just been very diplomatic about it. So to come back to Tricia's point, you're right. We should be pointing the fingers at the right people to actually fix things in the right way, but we need to put it across diplomatically. And that's the one thing I've learned over a number of years. How do we actually explain to people that if they want things to be better, they need to be expected to change. They need to take on board what agility is. Don't listen to all this thing about ceremonies and processes and whatever. You need to start with the mindset. You need to start with education. And also something Michael has pointed out, a lot of times when we talk about what are the current problems you're seeing, we should also ask what are the other current problems that you're not seeing? What else is out there? there could be other departments as well. So let's just not fix the one problem in this one place. You could be having a problem because of something further upstream or downstream. Think about the Phoenix project. There's actually a lot of people that all need to come together and look at this holistically. And I think that is one thing that's missing when we do a lot of consultancy, that we're pulled into a department, but not into a bigger organization. Or at least I have in my levels anyway. Okay, right. Well, I'll shut up now and go ahead over to Sanjeev.
Would you mind if I
Sanjeev,
just
can I add one thing just to Dave's real quick for that? Because I agree 100%. Like, I mean, that's why I'm a leadership advisor and I focus in on leadership in general, right? But I also want to be careful of, I've made this up. It doesn't actually exist, but it's the if I was the boss bias. Like everybody thinks like once you're the boss or you're the manager, you have complete control. No, they're still in a system, right? And they're still in a much challenging environment and based on old archaic crap and things like that. So I like just focusing on management as part of a system and not the evil manager per se persona, right? And so, but I agreed 100%. Like at the end of the day, most of the time it's leadership and how it's really supporting the environment and things like that. Sorry, Sanjeev, go for it.
No worries. So a lot of people have commented about the different dimensions of the problem of Agile, but whether it's the label or the set of frameworks that have come to be known collectively as Agile and such. But if I were to look at the problems that we're facing today, not just within the Agile community, but across the world, whether it's product development or sales or marketing and such, it comes down to the fundamental lean concept of value or the lack thereof. Can we deliver customer value reliably? Can we deliver stakeholder value for our organizations? Can we deliver organization value? Can we deliver team value? And can we deliver value for the people who are working on our teams, individual value? And maybe to throw something controversial over there, if indeed we say, well, the term Agile has gotten to be tarnished, and we're saying, let's move from a push Agile onto people to bringing it back to Alistair's and Jim's reminiscing of the early days where thousands of people are signing up for this thing that we called Agile. Well, maybe it's time to consider relabeling and dropping the word Agile and saying, okay, let's get back to these fundamental problems and how do we solve them. And we still have the Agile Manifesto, we still have the techniques, but now let's think holistically to Josh's point, outside of the set of frameworks that we call Agile, and look at more the holistic problems across the whole world.
Michael?
Yeah, I guess two things then, because I wanted to just quickly jump back to something that Dave said that really set off a chain of thought for me. But you mentioned about Deming potentially being quite critical of managers, right? Which is definitely true. I think one of the things that's actually really important to keep in mind in our world is Deming was very much a verified expert in what he did, right? He knew the domain, he knew the work, he had an incredible amount of management experience. You know, he was one of the world's experts on the topics that he was talking about. I think that buys you a certain ability to be a bit more open with your criticism than other people can get away with. But in particular, the problem in our industry is we have an awful lot of people that have done little more than a 2-day workshop and read half a Medium article trying to have a go at managers and developers and whoever else to tell them that they don't understand what they're doing. And I think this comes back to me again of that training problem, is that we've almost created an entire industry that's at the peak of a Dunning-Kruger curve. We've got a huge number of people that don't seem to realize how little understanding they've got of the topic because they've gotten just to the point where they think they understand everything. And again, I'm not trying to say that to have a go at those people. I fundamentally think that essentially it's people like us that are to blame for this, right? It's the people who are trying to be the experts, who are trying to coach and train and help other people to be better, because we're just not necessarily doing a good enough job at it. And I think we need to fundamentally rethink how we build expertise into people rather than just building into them this like baseline of, well, I know some frameworks and I know how to follow a process, right?
It's hard not to chuckle at being on top of Mount Stupid. Okay. Going back to the original question about, what problems do I see? It just made me think that I often describe that maybe a single problem is people doing far too much work to far too great a detail, far too in advance of the actual need. And then from there, you can unpack into all kinds of things that have to do with the holistic nature, how, from leadership, it's a springboard for having conversations around, well, why is that? Well, because we compartmentalize and we think things are simple and we can just break them down into, the UX will do all their, and the problem is, and I remember seeing this back in Defense Department days, you ask a spec writer to weigh in on something, what are you going to get? Well, 8 hours of specification, all kinds of detail. And I think that's what I would phrase if I had to pick one thing, just because for me, I can then riff off of that and help others maybe understand you need a much more holistic, and it's all of us. It's not just some of us that have to be involved with that.
Yeah. So maybe I would like to move this conversation a little bit ahead. I think some few minutes back, Alistair had mentioned or maybe quoted this, right? So people talk about Agile as some subdivision, but it's actually a project management thing, right? So I just wanted to ask, is there anything called as Agile project management? And if yes, then what it is? And if no, then why do people keep bringing up this topic of, say, Agile project management, Agile project management? Yes, Petula.
I'm not sure if Josh was before me.
I think Josh had his hand up first.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
go
then
ahead.
Petula beat me to it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel very personally insulted with the discussion of, product versus project. I really can't stand this anymore. I really don't understand what is a product that doesn't have bursts of development with some specific date or target you want to hit. And these things are what we call projects. There are many different ways of carrying them. There are many agile ways of going about it. Probably, not doing a different, I don't know, there's like 12 different documents that we used to do back in the 90s with the PMI. I'm not sure if it's still that way that I would do it, but we still have, even if your product is something like Uber or Uber Eats or something like that, that's easy to see. But when you are, let's say, in a fintech and you're servicing your customers and you have several different services and you offer several digital products, what is a product in this space? And while we keep having the discussion of trying to figure out what is the product and have product teams and things like that, I think we are losing track of what actually Sanjay said before he left us, which is that let's really talk about value, map all the ways in which value can be delivered, and figuring out then what are ways in which we can carry out continuous value delivery. And that, in my opinion, will be the different ways in which we will have projects occurring, some short, some longer, and then have the discussion going from there. So Agile project management, yes, absolutely. For me, that's not even a question.
Okay, John.
I think I forgot what I was going to say, so I will just pass.
Jim?
Well, I'll just say that I'm sorry Sanjeev is gone. Both he and I have written books with Agile project management in the title, so I guess it's the thing. But I think the move from project to product is also important, because we want to look at product from a value standpoint. And Sanjeev wrote another book on value management office. So he and I are both very much aligned on customer value as being the current measure. And so I think it's important. And there are all kinds of different projects. I think some people think that there's one kind of project. So, for example, I used to have a table that I would say, what was the risk involved in this particular project? And if the risk of change is very low, the uncertainty is very low, you can use a more traditional project management approach. So you have to think about the context of these things. So I don't think there should be an argument between product management and project management. I think they're both valid, and pieces of each can be used in any different project.
Yeah, for me, Petula, what came to mind as you were describing that is we so often hide, a word is supposed to mean something abstractly and speed up our way of communicating. But I often say we need to align the thought bubbles above our head. So when someone says project versus product, I think, oh, you mean project, like I remember this team who acted really strange when I was working with them, that they did way more in the features than I wanted. And when I asked them why, it was because their only experience was the business, there was an insurance company, would give them a project to build something, and they would never have time, they would never get an opportunity to come back and refine it and build more. So when for me, if someone says project versus product, that example comes to mind. And I was like, well, forget that. That's not how we're going to work here. That's not how it works. For me, what you're describing is, again, kind of missing the first bullet of the manifesto, which is collaboration and really working and to understand what do we mean by that, because they're just two words. But I get it. It is like a foolish argument, because whenever you say it, what's the thought bubble above everybody's head? Who the hell knows? And if you don't get to the bottom of that, you're not actually collaborating, or you're barely communicating. So anyway.
So I think the other challenge, I'm going to bookend myself for this, is the other one that I'm going to say out loud is there are times that the Agile community, I'll hear things like, oh, Tricia, you live in fantasy world. It's like, no, I've actually done it. I've done it multiple times. It's not fantasy. And yet I do think that Agilists, we do live in this nirvana space where we actually believe it's all about the value. And the reality is, there's a lot of corporate greed right now driving things. There's a lot of capitalistic dynamics of record profits with layoffs, and so we can keep talking about value drives everything. And yes, we can nobly say that in organizations, and yet there are organizations that corporate greed is going to make a lot of what we're talking about not get prioritized, not be valued, not be hunger and need for, because it's not really what it's about. It's about the stock buyback or things along those lines. Now, they'll never publish that. But I think that that's part of what contributes to seeing Agile as part of the solution or part of the help. Is it doesn't always, and it goes to Dave, some of our conversation about management, right? It doesn't always make it easy for managers to do the right thing because the system is set up for not customer value all the time. And I think that's a reality, that there's a clash in our movement and our next agility forum, right? Is we are very much focused on value, and it is the driver. I don't know if that's really the case in all organizations, or how those systems are set up, and that's a reality that we're facing today.
If
Maybe
you can just
always have, but it seems more right now.
Yeah, and adding to that, Tricia, and I know there's someone going after, just, value, I think in the Agile community maybe stays too much in customer value, but I think we need to remember that value is defined by the entity, by the corporation. I think Bain & Co, they have this very nice document in which they publish some 20 different types of assessing value for B2B companies, and I think some 30 others for B2B. So between B2B and B2C, they had the model. So I think it's very fun to go and look into, because customer perceiving the value is just one piece on how we can define that. But going after that thing, that could be, and it's sad to know, but it could be shareholder value, will then be for many companies. You're absolutely on spot there.
Okay. Mike, do you want to go? Do you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so going back to the project management thing, I think the thing that jumps out to me is that we've gone through like a bit of an overcorrection, right? I think the reason that there was this big movement that was like pushing back against the concept of project management is because project management had traditionally been a very painful thing for a lot of people. They'd been through a traditional ITIL or Prince 2 kind of project management environments, probably where those things weren't particularly well understood or weren't well implemented, created negative outcomes. And so they became like almost aggressive towards the idea of project management, seeing something like product or agile as some kind of like wholesale replacement for those things. But I guess the bit that's ironic to me is this is exactly the space we're in with agile right now, right? Like the thing that's now happened is that we've gone through 2 decades of agile being often poorly implemented and creating a lot of pain, and now people are becoming aggressive or standoffish to the idea of agile. And I think it just shows that these things are a bit of a pendulum, and we're going to probably see this happen over and over again. And what I hope is that maybe agilists will be a little bit more empathetic now to the way project managers have been treated, or project management professionals in general have been treated, because we're now going through the same thing, right? And it's really easy to say, well, project management sucks. Well, maybe it's just that these implementations weren't very good and we should be trying to improve them, right? And agile in a lot of ways is just an attempt to improve project management, which really isn't something that anyone rational is likely to be against, right? So
oh, it's back to me, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Well, I'm going to argue against Petula's point, but I'm going to have to admit, not grudgingly, that she is correct in many things there. So just to 1 o'clock back a bit, I used to teach project management. It was I said project management, and it was basically about the 7 steps to go through to build the critical path, build your plan. And it came down to, if you needed to do a certain thing, any amount of time and money, you could do everything. But you didn't have any amount of time and money, so you need to do certain things in a certain order in order to get to that end objective within a certain period of time. So it's all about, number 1, build a plan, and number 2, stick to it. Now, okay, this is the non-agile viewpoint, but it was all about what is the shortest, most optimal route to get to that thing. And then when you've got a network diagram, etc., plan your critical path out, you know where things are going to slip. Now, the inherent thinking behind that is we are trying to reduce variation. We're trying to introduce rigidity into it so we get to our outcome as soon as possible. And when we talk about, well, is there such thing as agile project management? Well, you're talking about trying to introduce flexibility into something that is rigid. So I argued against that, but I still believe there is something about an agile project manager. You can easily manage a project in an agile fashion. Now, when I went to one conference, when there were many project managers talking about giving advice, and one statement was, if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, what was it? One person said, bring bad news to me early. Another one actually said, don't come for a job with me until you've been on 3 failed projects. Another one said, project management is all about relationship management. There are all of these things coming out. And what it was clear to me was none of these are all about stick to the process. They're all about people. Now, if I'd have known at the time, if I could have just pointed them at the damn manifesto, if I'd have known then, I thought there's the answer to a lot of your problems. And you think about what the manifesto and Crystal and other stuff is about, it's all about the people side. And that's what I still think Agile is about. Now, I'm positive that you could begin with a static project and then you can start to relax, or you could begin with Agile and you work your way into trying to introduce some project aspects in, and you're going to come to the same place in the middle. But I think outside of, let's not bother about project management, let's not think about product management, let's think about value creation. And that's the big thing that Petula mentioned at the end. I thought, no, God, that is right, actually. It's how do we create it? And if you read the Chaos report, there's all this obsession about how many projects succeeded and failed. Well, the failure was it overran my 2 days. They call that a failure. Yeah, but did we get any value out of it? So I don't think project success for me is actually the be all and end all. I think it's all about value creation and customer satisfaction. You know, it's that big thing that I mentioned in that, what was it called again? Yes, the manifesto. You know, the very first principle about making sure customer satisfaction. So that's my thoughts on it. But I'm interested to hear what Saket and Jim and others have to say back against that.
Yeah, Josh, go ahead.
Well, I wasn't going to
Josh.
weigh in on the project versus product thing, but I think what I notice in the world is people in general love to go for the quick and easy stuff. Anything that's quick and easy is very, very attractive. Frankly, you know, I don't want to beat up on certifications. I'm trying to lead without blame. But if we talked about the CSM, which was one of the darkest moments in the field as far as I'm concerned, that was the beginning of the end. And it was this, hey, 2 days, go to a class and I'm certified. And it just spread like wildfire. So when people think of Agile as being so successful because so many people started getting this idiotic certification, that was actually just Agile on steroids and very, very damaging for the movement. Although some would call it the gateway drug, I thought it was always a very bad idea. But I'd say people in general want quick and easy. So if you're using Uber or Lyft, quick and easy. If you're using TikTok to spread your word, great, quick and easy. AI, quick and easy, right? Is it graceful long term? You'll have to see. I've seen quick and easy really get into a big pickle when it's not graceful in the long term. So it really needs all three. But I don't think our movement will go further if we can't find ways to help people apply it in a quick, easy, and graceful way. That it's hard work we do. I mean, changing an organization, well, we all know it's monstrously difficult, right? I mean, that's hard, and no one's buying hard and slow. They're just not interested in hard and slow. They're looking for the pill. They're looking for the quick and easy. And so, what does that look like? That's a meaningful solution, a meaningful thing we can do, not a CSM solution, but something meaningful that can actually help, but which is attractive because it's, quick, considered to be quick and easy. That's the predicament I see us in. We're up against some wicked problems in organizations, but yet they won't be interested if it's not somehow perceived as a quick and easy way to fix things.
So I teach project management, I teach program management, and I do agile coaching as well. And I do teach critical path dev. Yeah, so that all happens. And I think I agree that the bubble may be different when the word of a project comes in people's mind. So there could be perceptions. And what I personally see that, yes, there is a burst of energy we need to put for a while, and then there is a calm down period. We don't get a funding for an idea for next 5 years in a one go. We may get it for 6 months. After that, we want to see it, how it turns out. Then we do a second round of funding, and then that kind of initiative comes in. Now we can call it that we have a value stream based teams which can continue doing it, but there is a probability next time when we want to invest money, that team might be busy somewhere. So we may name that thing something, yeah, but there is a hype of activity, and then there is a cool down happens. That's a one thing which I see. But at the same time, I think we should not take an extreme view. There is always a need of putting some investment at a product level as well. So we should not be just doing project and forget about the product. So there is a group who is working on the product. Maybe not development is not happening, but there is a product group. Yeah, there is a product in view. There is a roadmap in a view, but yes, there is not having in the active development. What I see in the industry, especially we work in a service sector, India. So India is always, when you want to do a lot of things, you hire a vendor. Yeah. So vendor always have to do a project. You just come into picture when someone wants to invest lots of money for a short duration, and after that they want to take a pause. Yeah, that's the usual case. So in service sector, we do have projects, and yes, we can bring, as the Dave pointed out, the flexibility, the collaboration, the people. The current PMI, they say even for PMP exam, they tell 42% you need to focus on people. Yeah, you need to bring people in the game because the project success is always about people. I tell in my classes that sometimes you may know how to write risk register, but you still be a failure. Yeah, sometimes you just know how to deal with people, you will be successful even you don't record the risk in a risk register, because people support you. If people want to support you, you will be successful anyway. Yeah, so that's there. Yeah, you need to converge. But I do see from a service sector, there is a good focus on program management now. So we do see that, yes, project was considered more temporary. So we may need to do some augmentation. Let's create a little more longer duration work, provide some augmentation, run a program, and then have a product team who might be keep thinking about it. But we may stop after the program gets done. So the accountability of transitioning and sustainability is considered to be a part of project or a program, whatever word we do, rather than thinking like the bubble, like the John bubble. The point is, rather than thinking project means I produce deliverable and then I'm done, I don't care after that. That part is actually is not the right interpretation of the project anymore. And the organization as well as the educators are going away from it. They are focusing on the change management becoming part of project, or maybe a part of accountability. You need to do a sustainment planning, and that's what I see the program management becoming a little more augmentation of the project management nowadays. As a project manager trainer, that is what I see in my area of work.
Really amazing thoughts, Saket. You wanted to add?
Yes. So from my perspective, if I want to talk on this agile project management, right? See, project management is fundamentally going to be a project management. be it a traditional waterfall model or an agile driven engagement. However, the game plan here typically changes in terms of how do we selectively take some of the PMI process areas and then probably put it in the right sequence. So from a real-time implementation perspective, my view is companies wanted both predictability and companies also wanted both adaptability on the go. Meaning to say, because the business is going to fund, business always wants predictability. But then for us to have a business agility, you need to be adaptable on the go. So I think even in project management, we need to have that fine art of balancing between predictability and adaptability to sustain in the long run. That is something I just wanted to add here. Thanks.
Okay. John, do you want to add? I see your hand
Sure.
raised.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind is, and I just realized I learned this lesson back in the day. So going from aerospace engineering and traditional project management, Gantt charts and all that stuff. I remember the first time I tried to run a software project like that, I just wanted to blow my brains out. Like, okay, that was stupid. But essentially the way that I think about it now is, you have a spectrum of things that we need to do, some of which are simple, some are maybe complicated, but still knowable, like a car, right? It's complicated, but it's knowable. And then we've got the things that are fuzzy and complex. And with the mindset of trying to force everything into being predictable, you're actually throwing out a potential opportunity of, if you can stay slightly uncomfortable with the fuzzy, that's usually where creativity, innovation, and true value comes. But God forbid, we leave some fuzziness in some, manager's mind or project man. So I think we just need to recognize, I've always said, working with a project manager that knows their stuff is amazing, but just don't apply it to the wrong thing. And don't let, the demands of give me a date, all that kind of crap, when it's still fuzzy, unknowable. So that's what comes to mind as I listen to these conversations is, yeah, there's a lot of power in project management. Just don't apply it to things that are fuzzy, or apply it less firmly, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jim, do you wanted to add something?
No, my hand keeps going up without me doing anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Balaji, you wanted to share?
No,
Michael.
I'm actually done.
Okay. Mike, go ahead.
Cool. I guess I just wanted to add something to what John was saying then, which is it actually ties back to something I said earlier on about the different kinds of work and the culture conflict that exists right between different kinds of management techniques, and often we don't do a good job of bridging the gap. But that word that you used, fuzzy, I really like it, because I think about the importance of understanding emergent work, right? And I think that's one of the key things that the manifesto certainly helps me to frame, right, is that there's some work where you know what you want to deliver, so you need to just go to deliver it. And even that work can be very, very agile, but it's a mix of things. But then there's work that's emergent, which is where you can't know what you're going to deliver until you start delivering, because it's that uncertain. And that's the place where anything other than an agile way of working can be very, very dangerous. And I think a lot of our practitioners and certainly a lot of our leaders struggle to identify which type of work is which thing. And so then we end up inadvertently applying the wrong practices, right? And this is where I think a lot of the agile pain has come from in the last 10 years as well. Is I regularly see agile practitioners insisting that we have to work as if we're doing something highly emergent when we're just doing like an Oracle database 3.5 to 3.6 upgrade in the back end. So, well, actually, we can probably just work through a fairly fixed plan for that, right? But it's knowing when to pick a certain toolbox, I guess.
Wow, love that point. I think this is exactly what Dave Snowden also keeps on talking about. Obviously, moving projects from a complex world to a more maybe a complicated or maybe a manageable world. That is what exactly. But obviously, you made a very valid point where people assume or maybe build up into a way that we are still working in a complex domain or we're still working in a complex environment, right? So there's so much of conversation, especially specific to this entire space of project management, or maybe to say it an agile project management. I love this conversation. Maybe no, we'll move to the next last part of this conversation. There are a couple of more things that we wanted to bring up to the discussion, but respecting everyone's time, maybe the last one that we wanted to pull up into this conversation is like the future of agile. We're still again going back and talking about the future of agile. Plus, with the advent of AI, how have things changed, or maybe what is it, things that we should look forward in this altogether space of agile? Do we still believe that we're still emerging, we are still building onto it, or we need to move on from here on? Anyone would like to take on?
Yes. So my perspective to this in terms of the future of agile is that gone are the days where we actually talk about something called as a vanilla agile, means only on the agile perspective. Now what actually typically the industries want is a mix of a functional capability or a functional SME combined with some amount of a domain knowledge, because we also need to understand that agile implementation in a banking organization is something different from an agile implementation in a healthcare sector. And similarly, agile implementation in a data science project is something different from an agile implementation in a data warehousing or a cloud migration initiative. So definitely the future of agile need to factor the domain, the capability and the functional knowledge SMEs, and not really binded to a single framework, rather than understand the ground level challenges and probably take the best practices or principles from multiple places and create your own customized agile framework. Of course, factoring the Shugari journey of the team, because we also need to be cognizant about the maturity level of the team. I think these are all some of the things. And also the main point is that, like as I already mentioned, we also need to dovetail the agile implementation together with the business operating model of that particular company or the organizations, so that we actually think about the principles behind the practices and not just clinging on to a specific framework or a practice. Okay, that's my thought. Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely agree, Balaji. So frameworks become of low relevance. That's already a reality today, and I can see that really not, that's definitely not going to be what pays the bills for institutions out there. And I think, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, a good one, that the future of agile, is remaining adaptable. So, in that, I think whichever coach or manager, person trying to deal with those issues is someone who will be able to support others into how to really mobilize workforce. So it's as a team, it's a group of workers. Sometimes you have companies that really run on contractors alone, and that's done, that's doable. But the question remains, how do you do that really effectively? How do you get performance out of those environments? How do you utilize your systems best? And the question of speed is always there. Nobody likes to think about that, but speed, we see the speed in which we live our lives these days, and just keeps accelerating. So there is no adaptability if you can't keep up with the speed. So at the organizational level, and how this really comes to impact people, that will be really relevant as well. So for me, it has been the reality in my company that we work with a lot of leaders and the emerging leaders of our, our present and our future, because this is not so much a conversation of the points to tweak in the system, which are also needed. But ultimately, I think Dave mentioned that, and other folks too, in the end, all the work is for people, by people. So people are the common denominator in everything. So we have to really be more and more focused on the uniqueness and how to combine all that uniqueness to make something truly magical for organizations. So I hope that is where we are going, and those who do that successfully clearly have a place to stay, the organizations. And it's possible that we'll see more organizations that have a shorter life cycle. We see more organizations dying now because they can't keep up with that, with that sort of adaptation to the speed and the change.
Jim?
I think I'll go next. I've been working on this article called The Lord of the Rings Approach to Artificial Intelligence, because I think that what's happening in the world today is two things about artificial intelligence. One, as Petula said, it's speeding things up. Things are happening much faster. And secondly, the breadth of things that artificial intelligence impact. I mean, you look at the breadth of things, and it's really, really huge. It's business, it's economy, it's social, it's government. It's all scientific field. And so the thing that I would like to carry forward out of the Agile community is the sense of how do you work under that degree of uncertainty. And that you actually, what I tell people is you can't plan for artificial intelligence. You have to view it as a quest. And that quest is going to run into dragons, it's going to run into mountains that you have to climb over, it's going to run into spiders, big spiders, it's going to run into all different kinds of obstacles, and you're going to have to maneuver around it. So you can't have a plan in the old simple plan. You've got to have a quest. You've got to have a direction, and you've got to be willing to adjust your tactics as you go after the next dragon. So I think this is what I call the Lord of the Rings approach to artificial intelligence.
Oh, does that mean there's like a burning pit somewhere and Sauron and all that? Yeah.
Of course,
I think.
And you're going to follow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're probably undergoing a natural phase of how ideas. I think Alistair would often say you can put ideas out there and how people interpret them and do with them, it's up to them. But I do believe that there's a bit of a correction, a little bit of flooded the world with all kinds of people rushing in that maybe it's just a natural process that, for me, the tenets behind the manifesto and the concepts are timeless, at least for 20, almost. We're going to be doing a 25-year reunion at some point in the not too distant future. And I still think that there's a good future ahead of us for people to recognize that it's more than just frameworks, more than just certifications. And I'm actually happy that there's been this kind of a jolt to our community, because I actually checked out of the community when all this started happening. I was like, all right, good freaking luck, because you're not going to get the desired benefits that you think you're going to get. So have at it. I'm just going to go do my own things with teams and have fun building products and doing joyous and meaningful work. So I hope more people are actually going to start to realize there's more to it. So that's my hope for the future.
Anyone else would like to add? No one. So maybe I have one curious question, especially for the people who have written the manifesto, John and Jim, because only you two are here. So when you were writing this manifesto, or maybe you are forming this manifesto, did you think of such roles like, say, agile coaches or scrum masters or any other role who would be ensuring that agile manifesto is followed, or maybe is respected, or maybe would take it to the organizations? I mean, where this entire thing of different agile practitioner roles even emerge? I mean, was there in your thought process while you were writing this agile manifesto?
We didn't really talk about any of that stuff. I mean, each of the approaches, like XP had a set of practices, Scrum had a set of practices, I had a set of practices for adaptive software development. And so we each had a set of practices, but we didn't really talk much about those practices and who did what kind of framework is involved, or what kind of training does involve. Realize this, the values part of this was written in a couple of days. And so to get 17 people together and write that kind of, come to that conclusion in 2 days was a feat in itself. and then the principles were written over the next 3 months online with the very primitive tools we had at the time. I think it was a wiki, wasn't it, John?
Yep, Ward's, yeah, it's like we got introduced to Ward's wiki, basically. Yeah. Cool new idea.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I would echo Jim. I often describe it as, we left our egos at the door. I mean, I didn't have one, but the other guys. But I actually say that, Jim was famous, Uncle Bob, right? There are a lot of people, Kent Beck and the whole crew of XP. Definitely a lot of people, but yeah, we did start off by just describing how we practiced. And I view it as, it was kind of a bunch of us were object modelers too, but you get a bunch of folks in a room and you describe, in essence, a bunch of different practices. Of course, well, not of course, but we were skilled to be able to abstract up. That's what a lot of object modeling is all about, abstracting up, getting to the gist. And yeah, it was rather miraculous. And we literally, Alistair reminded me earlier in June or May that we literally got 100% agreement to the exact wording, because I'm a wordsmith nut. I know I'm a little, pain in the ass about that, but we literally got everyone to do a thumbs up on the exact words. And there, maybe a little more discussion going on with the principles, as Jim was saying, but I think there was absolutely no discussion around something as what I might call minutia about roles or things like that. I would almost think of it as the antithesis. Like that's part of the problem is that works great when things are simple or complicated. It doesn't work at these higher levels of thinking, so to speak. And I also like to tell a story that's also not true, but I often say that a bunch of us are in the room and we're, cleaning up, ready to leave. Ward Cunningham is heading out the door. And before the door closes, he stops himself and he goes, "Hey guys, should I put this on the web?" Which in early 2001, the web was like, oh, cool, there's movie reviews online. Whoop-de-doo, right? It was nothing. And so it was kind of like, yeah, why not? We actually got something written. Go ahead. So I know that's not true, but it's a story I tell myself as to, we had no idea this was going to kick off something that we'd be talking to 20 plus years later. So anyway, that's kind of my answer to that question. No, we didn't talk about roles. We didn't do RACI diagrams. I only learned the word RACI like 6 months ago. Like, what the hell is RACI? What are you talking about? So no, we didn't do any of that.
One of the things I'd like to say is that was happened, excuse me, at a particular point in time. Particular bunch of people got together, and it sort of all gelled. If you put those 17 people together today, they couldn't agree on anything. Right, John? Because we tried a couple of times and it hasn't worked at all.
Yeah.
So I would agree. I want to go to Dubai.
Right.
But I think, I make sure that people understand that was written 20-some years ago by a group of people. I mean, we put that group of people together just like we put this group together today. It's sort of who knew who, and invite them, and there was really no other thought other than this person is known to be a Scrum person, this person was known to be an XP person, and that's the way it kind of evolved. And so, to have what has come out of that meeting perpetuate for 20-some years, it could all go away today and it still would be worth it.
So I can't speak prior to 2007. I mean, technically I was doing frameworks, but I had no idea what the Agile Manifesto was to that. But I also like to highlight at that time in 2007, even a few years, it was small community but it was a passionate community, and it was constantly learning. Like I like to refer to it, it was like kid in a candy store. There was no time to like get locked into like it's my way or my role or because there was constantly new frameworks, new practices, new ideas, things. There was a lot more growth mindset in some regards at that time. There were still egos, there was still fighting, there was still like, you're right, you're wrong, but it was because it wasn't established, because it felt like anything was possible and things like that. There was a lot more kind of exploration and innovation, and as a result of that, it had a different dynamic for many years early on in those stages, to where it did feel very inclusive. Like there's a lot of people that will say, well, it's just the people who wrote the manifesto, and I was a newbie person that came a few years later, but I felt very included and very welcomed and very like supported in creating ideas and things along those lines. And I don't always think that part of the story gets told. It's but it was a very welcoming community for many of those years of figuring out and innovating, and it was a kid in a candy store for me for years.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I felt, especially in the early days, in a very exceedingly humble fashion, to Jim's point about it was kind of a random grouping that gelled, a little bit like the let's say the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. A bunch of folks got together, probably couldn't do it a second time, and something magical happened that hit a resonant frequency. That happened to be about the governments of mankind, so to speak, and it hit a resonant frequency. And I think we hit a resonant frequency. And you're right, Tricia. It took off beyond our wildest dreams, and I know, especially traveling to places like India or South America, or let's say Eastern Europe, not the core U.S. You could really feel that years later. You could really feel that same, because it's almost like there was a delay that it got to. But people, it's humbling to have been part of that, to realize it unleashed a lot of freedom. And, like it was like an aha moment for a lot of people, like, this, wow. And it gave them the courage to try new things and to do new things. And yeah, so it's you don't get that with frameworks. Sorry, right? None of that crap is anything like what it was, so who knows if we'll ever be able to recreate that? Probably not. But thank you for mentioning that, Tricia, because I felt the same way early on. Yeah. And I'm trying to get one more shot before I give up. Yeah.
I want to just say a couple of things about the future of agility, because I think you see things in the world, like when the economies start to suffer, maybe more of authoritarianism starts to come in, or you start to see a totally different approach to how to govern a country or this or that. I think with economic changes, people start going off to different ways of working, or they abandon Agile, they want to abandon Agile. I don't think we've done a great job of selling the value of Agile. That is, what kind of dollar value do you get from doing some of these principles and practices? That is, upper management is not looking at it as like, actually, I will save money and time with this, because we don't really quantify it. We don't really take our work and say, this is how it actually helps you. So I think we have a challenge ahead of ourselves to do that, to sell better. We talked, I think Tricia mentioned it too, is the branding and marketing sales is just Alistair poo-pooed that idea. He said, you can't be pushing this. People need to pull it. Well, they won't pull anything if they're not attracted to it. And when economic situations are hard, you've got to help people see why this is a beneficial thing. So just looking forward, I think we need to be humble enough to realize where we're not selling very well and where we're not visualizing the value of our own thing. And that's something that we need to get better at. It's value-based sales is an entire field in the sales business where you can actually quantify your value. I know nothing about it. I'm learning about it, but I'm a total newbie. And I just, the other day, I literally asked Amy Edmondson, what's the value? How do we sell the value of psychological safety? Right. And that's a topic that people are like, psychological safety is really important. If you yell on the buzzword, well, great. Huh? You know, how's an executive going to care unless somehow they know that, you know, as Google found, it led to the highest performing teams, right? That's a famous study, but you know, most executives are not caring about that. They're not seeing that correlation, and someone needs to start helping to connect the dots of the value of work we do to what's happening on the ground. So I don't know. I think it's a very foggy world ahead for us. It's not clear. There's a lot of uncertainty. We really have to be humble, and we have to get back to thinking about what can this look like to be more appealing and valuable. Because it's not about, you know, I loved Michael's example of our Oracle 3.5 to 4.2 upgrade. You know, most people would say, well, that's not an Agile project because that's just doing, you know, and I think we have to get past thinking of Agile as a bunch of sprints and stand-up meetings, and thinking of it as what is the quickest, easiest, most graceful way to get something done, where it's financially more beneficial, it's beneficial to the customers. What's that look like? Because that could be a variety of tools. It's not sprinting and stand-up meetings, that's for sure. But we're stuck. We are very stuck in mindset-wise. This entire industry, most people, the way they talk about Agile is frameworks, ways of working. That's it. Agile versus waterfall, Agile versus lean. It's not helping us. You know, we have to transcend that. So a lot of work ahead, you know, to really push this forward. But if you look at Stoicism, by the way, Stoicism took centuries to evolve, right? So in some sense, and I've said this before, is we're still in the early days of the Agile movement. It's really only been 20 plus years or so, you could say, and there's a long way to go. If we stop thinking of it as this ancient, you know, retirement home practice where it's done. Think of it as like it's really was just leaving its teenage years, and it's finally starting to become an adult, but just a young adult, and it has a long ways to go. That's more optimistic, and it could get us in a mindset of, okay, what do we do next?
Well said, Josh. Michael, quickly, would you like to add?
I'm just going to jump in real quick. I have a hard stop right now at 11. Thank you so much, folks. Awesome conversation. See you in full of the podcast. Bye.
Thanks, Petula.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Petula.
Thank you, Petula.
So I guess in the interest of time, then I'll just keep it really quick. But I was trying to avoid doing any dysfunction mapping plugging. But Josh, what you were saying sort of spoke so much to what I'm doing at the moment that I can't resist. The idea of connecting the dots for people and helping sell the value of what we're doing. Like, this is what I'm trying to do with dysfunction mapping, right? And it's regardless of the approach, I think that the mindset, the thing that's been missing for a lot of our practitioners is we go in trying to solve theoretical problems that we've read in our textbooks, rather than actually trying to understand the problems that the people in the teams around us care about, and then pulling in the practices that will potentially help with those problems, right? And I think that's where a lot of us get sidetracked with the just implement a framework. And so, yeah, like I 100% agree. It's what I focused all my energy on is how can we teach people an approach that allows you to really understand the problems that are going on and pull in the actual practices or principles that we think are going to make a difference. And, you know, it doesn't have to be my approach, obviously. I just think if we all were doing that a little bit more, we might start realizing that the whole implementation of a framework from the top down is, you know, not the best way to go about it.
That's amazing, Michael. I think that was it for the conversation. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming over and doing this podcast with us. It's a great pleasure and honor, as I've said earlier as well. It's literally kind of a dream come true for us, because I don't think we would get another opportunity to kind of bring such a great minds of Agile. Now I'm even scared to even call it as Agile based on the conversation. So it's great to have you all, and looking forward to more such conversations together with this kind of a elite group, I would say. Thank you so much, everyone, once again. Vivek?
Thank you.
Yeah, nothing from my end. I mean, obviously, really enjoyed this conversation. One. Second is obviously there was so much of learning. I was just taking down all my notes, and hopefully, I'll definitely, it's like the conversation of 2 hours. I need to break it down into multiple sections to get the insights, because there were so many thoughts flowing. There were so many contrasting, ideas being shared. So really enjoyed this. Hopefully, a lot of people will get definitely. Once we release it on YouTube and other streaming platforms, I'm sure that people will come back and share their own thoughts and ideas, saying that this kind of conversation is what really gives us more insights. So really enjoyed it. And thank you so much once again, everyone, for taking out your time and coming over and sharing, making this a wonderful evening for us. Thank you, Jim, for making this as a special podcast for us. I think without your contribution, I think we would have not pulled off this entire episode. So thank you once again for doing this for us.
You're most welcome. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for watching this episode patiently till the end. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll meet you again in the next episode. Till then, if you like our podcast show, then do like, share, subscribe, and let us know your feedback in the comment section. You can also listen to the episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. Thank you.